we'll look at that. So those of you who are not there, those of you who were for the last class, please make sure that you go through that particular session too. It will give you a better understanding of what clause and clause structure is. It's important that you know that part before you can listen to this, because it just clears you off. When you look at a sentence and then you look at it segment by segment, by which I mean when you look at individual segments that make up a sentence, the grammar part or the structure part becomes clearer to you, okay, instead of looking at it as such or looking at the sentence as such a whole thing. So if you haven't already followed the lectures, or if you haven't listened to the other session that was conducted, I think a week before, it would be nice if you can quickly brush through that probably after this class if you haven't already. Okay, if you've already been in the class, then it shouldn't be a big task for you. Okay. So we'll begin. I'll share the screen with you and we'll look at the questions. But before that, I just would like to know from you, what do you understand by the concept of apposition? Okay. You can unmute and you can talk. Okay. So if you've already looked at the lectures or if you've stumbled upon it somewhere, you can talk about what you've already understood about it, or generally let's revise on clause itself. Let's listen to that first and then we'll look at it. This is actually a bit of a confusing part, not confusing, but if it is the first time you're looking at it closely, then it could be a tough thing to begin with. So we'll quickly, once again, revise what clause and clause structure in English is, and then we can go on discussing about the appositive clause and apposition itself. Okay, so who would talk? Who would want to tell me what you understand about clause or clause structure in English? Yeah, no one? I see a few of the names that are familiar to me. I have seen a couple of you in the previous classes as well. So none of you want to go? Sneha, Priyanka, Jyotirlata, Smita. I see a lot of you. I mean, from what I can gather, I can.
Ma'am, may I?
Kanishk, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Ma'am, a clause is a group of words which has subject and verb and which has its relationship in the previous sentences. Basically, if we talk about we have subject and verb for the principal clause, and if it is something related to the another one, then it is called
you're telling me about you're telling me about subordinate clause. Okay, we'll come to that later.
Clause. I am telling
just
you.
To begin with clause.
Sorry.
Yeah, let's Kanishk, let him finish. We'll let Kanishk finish and then I'll come to you, Rahul. We can see he's answering already, right?
Yeah. Basically, I am telling you about clause, what clause actually is. So a clause is a group of words which contains a subject and a verb.
Yes. So how do you distinguish between, say, a sentence and a clause?
A sentence can be a simple, but a clause, if
can a sentence not be? So we're trying to understand what clause is, and we're also trying to look at sentence, right? So yeah. We discussed this question previously, but I would like to discuss this again. Will you not call the sentence a clause? Can sentence be a clause, or are clause and sentence
all sentences exclusive? Are called as clause? Because if they are, because a sentence is an independent clause only.
Okay. That's right. That could be one way of looking at it, that a sentence is an independent clause. Okay.
Yes.
And with respect to clause structure, a clause has what? It has a subject, it has a verb. Okay. Or rather you can say it has a subject and a predicate. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
both are correct. When you say predicate, you're basically referring to verb, because the That is the major part of.
Yes.
Because verb becomes the major part of any of the predicate. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
yes, then what about dependent independent clauses? So you already told me that a sentence is a clause, but what kind of a clause? It's an independent clause. So now tell me what is an independent clause and a subordinate clause, or alternatively also referred to as a dependent clause.
yeah. Basically, in a sentence, it has independent clause and dependent clause. Independent clause is also called as a metric clause or the main clause.
Sure.
So, in case of an independent clause, if there is nothing being related to the means we are saying directly the sentence, and the sentence is being not directly conveyed. Am I unable to explain? Yeah, just
No, try. So, okay. So, say if you're not able to look at one thing, then you'll have to start talking about the contrast to that, which is the subordinate clause. What do you understand about the subordinate clause?
in case of a subordinate clause, uh,
Okay.
basically,
All right. So, I'll come back to you, Kanishk.
yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So, Rahul seems to be wanting to speak from a long time. We'll listen to him. And
Yeah,
then if you have any difference of opinion or if you have
yes,
anything
ma'am.
more to add, then I can listen to you later. So
Yes, ma'am.
Rahul, go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am. There can be there are two types of clauses: independent clause and subordinate clause.
Yes.
Independent clause can stand on its own, and subordinate clause or dependent clause is the one which requires some other main clause.
Yeah, it's
It cannot
basically an
stand alone.
embedded clause, right? You can
Yeah.
usually found embedded within the independent clause, right? Because it
Yeah.
cannot stand on its own. It requires the support of the independent clause to complete its meaning, to not just about grammar, it's about, it's more, it's more linked towards the pragmatic part. It cannot stand on its own, it cannot give you a complete meaning if it exists on its own. So requires the help of the independent clause. Right, that's what we understand from this. All right, so that is your basic understanding. So you look at clause structure, you try and understand what clause is, how a clause is different from a sentence, what kind of a clause a sentence is. Then you come to independent clause and dependent clause and try and understand what an independent and a subordinate clause means. Okay, so we had this brief discussion in the class that we had 2 weeks ago. We've also looked at the adjectival subordinate clause, the adverbial subordinate clause, and the noun clause, right? The nominal subordinate clause. Now, today's class, we're going to look at one other category from that, which is an appositive clause. Okay, so we'll begin talking about the concept of apposition, or not concept as such, but what do we understand by apposition, and then we can move on to what appositive clauses mean, right? So have you had a chance to look at this in your video lectures? Because I think you've already had questions, right, in the graded assignments and the activity questions, I think, on appositive clauses. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, right. So what is your understanding of apposition? What do you understand by the word apposition? APPO, not opposition, position. What is it related to? So like if I talk about, say, the segment in a sentence, right? You have several segments. You have the subject, you have the predicate, you have, or let's talk in terms of phrases. Like you've already looked at the phrase structure part in English 1. So you have the noun phrase, you have the adjective phrase, you have the prepositional phrase. So when I talk about apposition, which particular phrase do you think this refers to? Any idea?
Noun clause, nominal clause.
It's mostly the function. This is a referential expression. Okay, when you talk about appositive clause, or when you talk about the concept of apposition, we basically talking about the referential expressions. And anything that has got to do with references has to be either related to a noun or a pronoun in the sentence, right? So you find these kind of clauses, the appositive clauses, usually as an embedded clause within a noun phrase. Okay, so the reference usually goes both this one, the clause, the appositive clause, and the noun phrase usually refers to one and the same thing. So look at an example like this. Okay, Cristiano Ronaldo, who plays for Manchester United, would also attend the event. Okay, suppose this is the sentence. Okay, just out of the blue sentence. Cristiano Ronaldo, who plays for Manchester United, is also invited to the event or would also be there at the event. Now, what is the appositive clause here? Or let's hear what's the subject here. Let's begin with that.
Cristiano Ronaldo, ma'am.
Yes. And then followed by you have who plays for Manchester United. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Is also invited to the event.
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of clause do you have here? Which is the clause actually? Which is the subordinate clause involved here?
Who plays for the Manchester United?
Who plays for Manchester United, right? So what kind of a clause is this? If you had followed lectures from the beginning, it's easy for you to understand. Who plays for Manchester United?
Ma'am, it's a noun.
This is the exercise that we are going to do today. So I'm just going to give you an introduction to it before we can jump into that.
It's a noun clause, nominal clause.
Is it a nominal clause? Look at it carefully.
It's
Ronaldo, who plays for Manchester United.
We are describing Ronaldo. We are describing
Ronaldo. So if you're describing, then what kind of a clause it should be?
Adjective, I think.
Adjectival clause, and this is particularly what you also refer to as a relative clause. Okay,
yes,
because it shows the relation between the noun phrase, which is Cristiano Ronaldo here, right, and the modifier, which is who plays for Manchester United, right? And how do you know that? You have the relative pronoun who here, right? Who, which, that, whom, all of them are what? Relative pronouns, right? This clause is a relative clause, right? So Cristiano Ronaldo, who plays for Manchester United, is invited to the event or is also a part of the event, whatever. That part doesn't matter to us. Then, now look at the sentence again. Cristiano Ronaldo, a player with Manchester United, is also invited to the event. This is different from the previous one, right? The previous one said Cristiano Ronaldo, who plays for Manchester United, is also invited to the event. The second sentence is Cristiano Ronaldo, a player with the Manchester United, is also invited to the event. You see this? They're given in two different ways. They're saying the same things, but in different ways.
Yeah, they are conveying the same thing.
They're conveying the same thing. But yes, look at the placement of the phrases. Okay, the first one has who is a player with. Second says a player with United, Manchester United. Okay. Do you have the relative pronoun here anywhere?
No, ma'am.
No. You have the second part, which is the player, a player with United, Manchester United, and Cristiano Ronaldo. They both refer to the same person, right? Or rather, a player with the Manchester United refers to Cristiano Ronaldo in the statement. Is it or
yes,
not? Right? So in a statement like this, wherein you have a same reference point without the presence of a relative pronoun, you call this particular clause an appositive clause. They are in opposition to each other. Both of them refer to the same person. How do you do this test? If you want, you can break open this sentence into two parts. Okay, how will you do that? The basic sentence is Cristiano Ronaldo, a player with the Manchester United, is invited to the event. If I ask you to split this open into two sentences, how will you do it?
Cristiano Ronaldo is invited to the event. I think this is one of the part.
Yes.
And a player of Manchester United, that's the other part.
Player with Manchester United or a player of Manchester United is invited to the event. Both of them, not great sentences, but grammatical sentences in English. Yes or no? Yes, they may not look like the smartest of the sentences, but still grammatical, right? Those things have not got anything to do with the grammar, but the grammar part is correct. They're both grammatical sentences. Yes, no? Yeah,
I'm not able to figure out, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. I'm not able to figure this out. Like,
so say that again. No? Look at the sentence again. You have broken it open into two sentences, right? Cristiano Ronaldo is also invited to the event. And the second one is a player with Manchester United is also invited to the event. My question is, are they both grammatical sentences?
Yeah, sounds correct, I think.
So they are grammatical sentences, right? Yeah. So this is what we have done with the second clause, the second sentence where you had the appositive clause, right? Now, if I take the first sentence, Cristiano Ronaldo, who is a player with Manchester United? If you try and see if you can break this open, okay, without doing away with the relative pronoun who.
Yeah, not possible.
Not possible because it leaves hanging. It's left hanging who plays with Manchester United. You cannot put it anywhere into an independent sentence. Right. So this is what happens with appositive clauses and relative clauses. It is tough for the other one to stand on its own. The other one, you can split it open into two different sentences. Okay. Now, basic difference being in appositive clauses or the function of apposition or an apposition between two phrases or clauses happen when both of them refer to the same thing. In the example that we were talking about, Cristiano Ronaldo and a player with Manchester United both refer to the same person, right? Now, the problem arises because in both these clauses, in relative clauses, the first case and the second one which we are discussing, the appositive clauses, sometimes your conjunction, the one that joins these two clauses is that. So you can have a relative clause which is joined with that. You can also have an appositive clause which is joined with that. So your major task is to figure out which one of the two, okay, because both of them use that. The major task is to figure out which one of it is a relative clause and which one of it is an appositive clause. Okay, and the test that you are going to do to figure out which one is a relative clause and an appositive clause is that you see if you can break open the sentences into two different parts. And can you have two independent parts with good grammatical meanings when you do the synthesis? Okay, if it is not possible with a given sentence, then most of the times it's going to be a relative clause. And whenever it is possible, it is going to be an appositive clause. Okay, so this is what we are going to look at. I have a set of sentences. We're going to look at it and figure out how to do the practice. But do you understand the difference? At least do you understand what an appositive clause means? It's different from a relative clause in the sense that in a relative clause, it's not, in relative clause could be giving you additional information about the main one. But in a positive clause, what happens? It just, it gives you a referential point which coincides with your subject or with the existing noun phrase. Okay. Sheikh Azad, you have a question? Yeah, I saw your this thing, but I was just giving you an example. In sense of solving the questions, you will get it on the screen very shortly. Okay, I was just giving you an introduction to what we are doing today. But you can still ask me a question if that wasn't the question you wanted to ask. Okay, so I'll share the screen with you then. Just give me a moment. Okay, can you all see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we're going to look at a few questions from here. Okay, so the first task, the first exercise is in appositive clauses. Indicate whether each underlined clause is a relative clause or an appositive clause. Okay, so that is just what we were discussing. The diagnostics that you're going to use is whether you are able to split open the sentence into two different ones. Okay, and not just split open, but split them open into sentences that are grammatical and meaningful. Okay, so let's see this. You can look at the first question and tell me whether, but actually before you solve the question, I want you to look at all of them. Just read all the sentences that you see on screen, 8 of them. There could be more, but right now just read 8. Look at all of them and tell me what is common to all of it.
The word that.
Yes, right. The word that, the conjunction that is common to all of them, right? But we already know that some of them are among the one that you see on screen are relative clauses and the other are appositive clauses. Our task is to figure out which one is a relative clause and which one is an appositive clause. So shall we start? Okay, we'll look at the first question. Look at that. The manager lacked the experience that would have helped him overcome the crisis. Yes. So where is the clause part here? If you can pick it out for me in the sentence. Which is the clause part here? The subordinate clause part here? That much you should be able to know by now.
Ma'am would have helped him overcome the crisis. Subordinate.
So it should be that would have helped him overcome the crisis. Okay. Now study that carefully. The manager lacked the experience that would have helped him overcome the crisis.
It is a relative clause only, I think. So
okay. So why do you think it's a relative clause?
Because this part that would have helped him overcome the crisis. This cannot be a sentence on its own.
You cannot break this open into a sentence.
Yeah.
Is it?
I think so, but I don't know.
Okay. That is, if you do away with that, the manager lacked the experience. If you take out the that from that particular sentence, can the sentence make sense on its own?
No,
the
ma'am.
manager, no, right? No. The manager lacked the experience. I removed that, and you have, the manager lacked the experience, would have helped him overcome the crisis, right? So this does not make any sense to you. So if this happens in a sentence, it basically means this is a relative clause. Okay, no prize for guessing that. So this that, the word, how is the word that in a relative clause different from the that in an appositive clause? Like in this sentence, the word that has a function within the clause that would have helped him overcome the crisis in a relative clause. Okay, so the word that has a function there. Whereas in an appositive clause, you can remove that and still have a meaningful sentence. Okay, if this is happening in the clauses that you have, it basically gives you a distinction between relative clause and positive clause. Now, there are relative clauses which can be written without that also. But to distinguish between this relative clause and appositive clause, the first major diagnostic you can run is this. Try and remove that and see if you have like a meaningful sentence. Okay. I don't know if I have an example where the relative clause exists without that. If we have it, it's good, well and good. Otherwise, we'll see when we can discuss that. But for this sentence, definitely this is a relative clause. And what is the difference of the word that we use in appositive and relative clause? In appositive clause, it is optional. You can have it even without that. Whereas in relative clause, the word that has a function to perform within the clause, within the that clause. Okay, so these appositive clause and relative clause, sometimes they're also referred to as the that clauses in English. Okay, so there are different kinds of that clauses. One of it is a relative clause and the other is an appositive clause. Basic difference is, in a relative clause, that has a function within the clause, whereas in appositive clause, it's optional. You can remove it if you want. All right. Okay, now look at the second one. You have undermined.
Appositive clause.
Sorry?
Appositive clause.
Oh, okay. Let's read the question first. You have undermined my conviction that a nuclear war is inevitable. You have undermined my conviction that a nuclear war is inevitable. Can you break this open into two sentences?
That
Yes,
and nuclear war is
Okay, that a nuclear war is inevitable is your clause. That is the conjunction which is joining. But if I remove that, okay, can I have two different sentences here?
yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So what
No.
are those two sentences? You have undermined my conviction. And the second one is, a nuclear war is inevitable. Right? See this? So then what kind of clause this is? If I remove that, I can still have a set of meaningful sentences. What kind of, so this is a positive clause. Okay, so here a nuclear war is inevitable basically is same as my conviction. It is referring to the same thing. My conviction and a nuclear war is inevitable is one and the same thing. They're referring to the same thing. See this? Okay, is that clear to you? If there are things that aren't clear to you, you should ask a question, because it's not every time that you get a chance to clear up these things, right? Can you all see this clearly? So in this sentence, you remove that and you can have a set of two meaningful sentences with the second part, which is a nuclear war is inevitable, referring to my conviction, which is a noun, which is where the name noun clause in opposition comes from. Okay, understand? Okay, if it is understood and if you have no questions, we'll look at the third one. Sorry.
Ma'am, both the sentences sound same.
They sound the same to you, but they are not the same. You look at them closely. So we have run a few diagnostics right now, right? So clearly there were differences in the first and the second.
Okay.
What is your doubt?
Basically, they sound similar, and I cannot, if we remove that.
You cannot what?
Ma'am, if we remove that and speak the sentence, then it is almost basically I unable to distinguish between the two. Miss, will you please repeat in another sentences? Okay, just third one. We can continue with third.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So because I don't get your question as such. Okay. Third one, we have, she has heard the news that all the passengers and crew escaped unhurt. She has heard the news that all the passengers and crew escaped unhurt. Two things. Okay, you try and remove that and see if you can have two meaningful sentences.
Yes.
Appositive.
Sentences.
Yeah, and what are those sentences?
She has heard.
She heard the news.
She has heard the news. And the second one?
All
the passengers and crew escaped unhurt. Now, this all the passengers and crew escaped unhurt refers to what?
News.
Right?
News.
That is the news. What is the news? That all the passengers and crew escaped unhurt. So you take out that from there and you can have two separate sentences with one of them referring to the other, right? So this is a example of what? A positive clause, right, Devashri? You're right. Okay, so this is an example of a positive clause. You don't have a relative because the word that you have in the sentence is not a part of the clause. If it is a part of the clause, you cannot remove it, like you saw in the first sentence, right? You remove it and you don't have anything. Whatever comes after that is basically it is hanging. You don't know where to place it. It is not a full sentence by itself, right? So
So,
that
ma'am,
is,
can we conclude a relative clause is a dependent clause and a positive clause is a independent clause?
no, they are not independent clause, and a positive clause will also be a part of the major one. So if you look at the sentence as a whole, then that all the passengers and crew escaped unhurt is an embedded clause, right? It is a subordinate clause to the previous one.
So
you see this? Your full sentence is still she has heard the news that all the passengers and crew escaped unhurt. We are only looking at the nature of the subordinate clause, right? The nature of the subordinate clause is a positive clause here in the sentence, whereas in the first sentence it's a relative clause, right?
okay.
We are looking at the clauses separately now. Let's trying to study the nature of the clauses, like we did with adjectival clauses, adverbial clauses, nominal clauses, etc.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, guys. So that's a good important question. Don't get confused. You don't make any conclusions like, you know, this one is an independent clause and the other is dependent. That's not how it works. We're still we're still discussing dependent clauses. What we're doing is we're discussing the nature of these dependent clauses, right? Why do we have to do it? Because see, you have relative clauses, you have appositive clauses. They're different in their nature and the way they function. But the problem here is both of them are using the same conjunction, that, right? There is a difference between both of them and we have to understand what is that, which is why we're looking at this exercise. All right?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Fourth one. I cannot dispute the fact that these are very common kind of sentences in English. Okay, I cannot dispute the one with you know, expression like the fact that, the belief that, the news that, all of them. I cannot dispute the fact that you have won the support of most members. So you can use your diagnostic, see if you can have two different sentences, grammatical sentences.
I cannot dispute the fact.
Ma'am.
Yes, and
You have won the support of most members.
most members. So what does it make it?
A positive
A
clause.
Positive clause, right? Again, a case of a positive clause. You can have two perfect sentences without that. And it is your positive clause. Now, fifth one. The car hit a bus that was full of children on a school outing. The car hit a bus that was full of children on a school outing.
The car hit a bus and was full
Relative
of.
clause.
Maitreyi, you can go ahead, or after that.
The car hit a bus and
Yes.
was full of children on a school outing, and means that was replaced by and. I mean, the car.
Sorry?
The car hit a
Huh.
bus and was full of children on a school outing.
You're giving me two parts of the sentence.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the first part is the car hit a bus.
Hit a
And what
bus.
is the other part?
And it was full of children on a school outing.
Okay, where is it in that sentence?
No. Oh, okay. Then it will be and was full of children on a school outing.
But you don't have it in the sentence as such, right? Lakshmi,
Yes,
you have any
the car hit a bus.
Yeah.
That is one sentence. That
Yeah.
was full of children on a school outing.
Is that a sentence?
Huh?
Is that a sentence? That was full of children on a school outing. Is that a sentence?
It's not complete.
It's not complete. So even if I remove that, you know, let's take out that because that is the one which is common, right? Was full of children on a school outing.
No, it's not complete.
No, right? So that has a function to perform within the clause, it means. So is it a positive clause or relative clause?
Relative clause.
Relative clause, right? So it is basically a modifier to the noun a bus. It is giving you additional information, not just giving you additional information, but also modifying the adjective, sorry, the noun a bus, the noun phrase a bus. What kind of a bus? A bus that was full of children on a school outing. So this is a clear case of relative clause. That here, the word that here has a function to perform within the clause, within the subordinate clause, and that makes it a relative clause, okay, not an appositive clause. Get the difference? Somebody, I again forget who asked me the question in the beginning. The person who was telling me that I did not understand the difference between two. Do you see the difference now?
Yeah, ma'am, understood.
Yes. So see,
Yes, ma'am.
so the only test here is to see if you can have them separated, right? Here that has to be inside the clause because it has a function to perform. You take it out and you have an incomplete fragment, not a sentence or a clause, an independent clause, right? That's the difference. Okay, now the sixth one. I have read the report that I received last week. I have read the report that I have received last week.
Yeah. A positive clause because we can separate the two sentences. I have read the report and I received last week.
I received last week. But what did you receive last week?
Report.
I have read the report that I have, oh, sorry, that I received last week. So if you break it open into a sentence,
I have received the report.
I have read the report. I have received the report last week, but you don't have it in the sentence. It only says I received last week. My question is, does that affect the fact that this is an appositive clause? No, right? It does not. You can still reproduce that part from the sentence. It is not given here because it's a part of the sentence given here for us. We don't have to repeat it. But basically, the full sentence is, I have read the report that I received last week. It is implied there. Right? So when you're breaking open the sentence, you can say, I received the report last week, not a problem. Okay. So then this is a case of what? You're right. Your identification was right. I was just asking you the question to understand if if there are people who would get confused with it. What clause is this?
Appositive.
Appositive. This is also a case of appositive. Okay. So when you break open the sentence, some people might think, but the sentence I have is I received last week. So don't go so literally into it. In grammar, I'll give you an example. There are imperative sentences, right? So sentences like sit down, stand up. So you would have heard in the lectures that these definitely come without a subject, right? But what is the implied subject? Sorry?
They have a subject. You sit down.
They have a subject. There is a conceptual space for a subject. You might not see it overtly, but in grammar, it has like a conceptual space there for the subject, right? So there are many things like this. So just because you didn't see the word report there, or because it sounded a little incomplete to you, it does not mean it is incomplete in itself. It can have a conceptual space there. In the previous case where we were looking at, was full of children on a school outing, it was tough to provide anything from our side, right? It clearly was a case where it was a fragment. It was like an incomplete sentence. But in this case, it's just an element which you can bring from outside and fit in, no problem. And that element is already present in the sentence. So we're not adding anything from our own side. So it's fine. Okay, so this is an example of an appositive clause. Seventh one, they have accepted the recommendation that my daughter be promoted to the next grade. They have accepted the recommendation that my daughter be promoted to the next grade.
They have accepted the recommendation. My daughter be promoted to the next grade. I think it's a positive clause. Because both
it is a positive. So you have two different sentences. One is they have accepted the recommendation. My daughter be promoted to the next. Right. So this part, my daughter be promoted to the next grade, is in opposition with the recommendation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Correct. Now the last one. Here is the report that the accusations should be referred to the police. Here is the report that The accusations should be referred to the police.
Here is the report.
Hmm?
The accusation should be referred to the police.
The accusation should be referred to the police. So what is this one?
Appositive, I think.
Appositive? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Is there anybody with a doubt? Lakshmi, did you have a doubt or were you asking any question?
Ma'am, the previous question I have. Sorry.
Just a minute.
Is this relative clause?
Which one? The seventh one
Eighth one.
or the eighth one? Sorry, not audible, Maitri.
Yes, ma'am. I think it's a relative clause.
No, which one are you talking about? The
Ma'am,
seventh one?
eighth one.
Eighth one. Yeah, if you think it is a relative clause, you should be able to explain why.
Ma'am, here is the report. Means what report? Like they said that here is the report. So I find here is the report is quite incomplete one. But the accusation should be referred to the police. It's a full sentence. But here is the report is something. I find it incomplete.
Here is the report doesn't sound grammatical to you. Is that the case with others too?
Yes, ma'am.
No, I'm asking others. Here is the report.
It's a sentence. The report sentence. It's correct, I think. Here is the report.
Here is the report. Or the report is here. Okay, if you want to like put it the other way around. The report is here. You just simply change it into an attributive form. Instead of saying the report is here, you said here is the report. Okay.
Ma'am, it's an appositive clause.
This is Lakshmi. Yeah. Now, yeah, it looks like an appositive clause to me also because here is the report to me is a grammatical sentence.
So here also we remove that from the sentence. Two sentences are formed. So as an appositive clause, ma'am.
Sure. Yeah, that is a diagnostic, but even otherwise, we're talking about the grammaticality of the first sentence, right? So Maitreyi says that here is a report. She feels that it's not a grammatical sentence. I am okay. I don't think it is
I might be wrong. Maybe I am wrong.
We might be wrong to Maitreyi. We're just trying to discuss.
Yes.
Could be, but as far as I understand, it's not an ungrammatical sentence. Very commonly used one. But I know the confusion could be because here is the report is more of like informal way of saying things. Usually you would say the report is here, right? So probably the confusion was because of that, but then it is not ungrammatical. Okay. There's a difference between things being formal, informal, and ungrammatical. It could be informal, but it's still grammatical. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ma'am, my doubt.
This is who? Rahul or Prem? Prem?
This in the seventh question, they have accepted the recommendation that this is the one part, but my daughter should be promoted. Is if it was there, then it should have been a positive clause. But it's like my daughter be promoted to the next grade. So this is ungrammatical, right?
My daughter be promoted to the next grade is creating troubles again, right? So you will understand this when you have looked at sentences which have mood, okay, which is the next part we are going to discuss. Okay.
Okay.
So haven't you heard sentences like let there be light and all that? You heard that? Yeah. So see, there are sentences which appear in English which talk about mood. Okay, so the one which we are talking about is subjunctive. When people talk about something that is uncertain, something that is tentative. That is, tentative means something that is not fixed or which is subject to change. Or when people express wish, okay, these sentences take up mode which we call as subjunctive. So subjunctive mode sentences usually have this structure. So it's not ungrammatical. This is a grammatical sentence.
Okay.
Okay. So Everything is not going to look like, so for that matter, even if you have something like stand up, this is also considered a sentence in English, no?
What, ma'am?
Yes
Sorry.
or no?
Yes.
Like if I say stand up, this is also a sentence in English, but what kind of sentence?
It's kind of informal, I think, or sorry.
Not formal or informal, I'm asking you what a kind of sentence. So you have exclamatory sentences, you have interrogative ones, declarative ones, and you also have what? Imperative sentences. We just discussed it. Right, the ones that express command and request. Yeah, so they are also sentences. Right? They don't look like your traditional English sentences with a subject and a verb and everything intact, yet they are sentences. They're identified as a different category of sentences. Right, and we don't call them ungrammatical. So this one, my daughter be promoted to the next grade, is also that kind of a sentence which indicates subjunctive mood. Point is, it's not ungrammatical. It looks ungrammatical because it does not follow the subject verb object pattern in English, but sentences could be more than that too. Grammatical sentences. Okay.
So stand up is what kind of sentence, ma'am?
Stand up is an imperative sentence. Okay, this is something you know. So sort of a command or a sentence which directs action, right? So sit down, stand up, eat fast. Okay, close the door. Okay, all of them are imperative sentences in English.
Okay.
Okay, so this is another kind of sentence which is referred to as a sentence with a subjunctive mood. My daughter be promoted to the next grade. Let there be light. Okay. May you prosper in your life. You know, all of those, they are examples of subjunctive mood sentences. And they are grammatical. They don't look like they are grammatical because very much like an imperative sentence, it can lack sometimes a subject, sometimes a verb, yet they are not considered as ungrammatical sentences in English. Okay. All right. Does that clear your question, your doubt, Rahul?
Okay, ma'am. Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So, okay. So this is a very important, you know, identification, very much required. So please keep a watch on this and practice this. Okay, as in when you have time, look for more examples from this category, more exercises where you can more exercises which let you practice the difference between relative clause and an appositive clause. Okay, keep the diagnostics that I have discussed with you. That should be a very, very good tool for you to understand the structural differences between these two. Okay. All right. Now, quickly, this won't take, the next part doesn't take much time, only 5 sentences you have. My idea is just to introduce you to what mood mean in English. Okay. So, what does mood mean? This is also, I think, one of the lectures from week 2 or week 3. Week 2, I guess, right? I think tense aspect and mood was discussed together.
It was in week 3.
Okay.
Yeah,
Week 3. All right. So, what is your understanding of this? Mood?
Mood is state, attitude, and modality of action.
It basically talks about the attitude of the speaker, right? So,
yes, ma'am.
So within attitude, what is it? It talks about the degree of necessity or obligation or probability, right? All of this. It refers to the attitude of the speaker, and more than that, grammatically, what is mood? It also talks about the attitude of the verb itself. Like, how does the verb function? So, any change in the mood, like every other grammatical category, is expressed on the verb. The verb is what changes in order to show you the change in the mood of the sentence, right? So we'll look at that carefully. What is indicative mood? Okay. What is indicative mood? And another thing about mood, it is not, it does not change according to, so mood can be represented in any tense. Okay, you have 3 tense mainly, like the future, the past, and the present. And this mood can be the changes that happen in a verb. It can be expressed in all the three tenses. Okay, so it's possible. Mode expression of the mode is possible in all the three tenses. So that is about the definition part of mode. Okay, now what are the three main modes that you have? You have indicative, you have imperative, or the subjunctive. Subjunctive has a further division, but that's not a part of our course right now, so I'm not going to be detailing on the differences of the subjunctive mode, but we'll just talk about what subjunctive mode in general is. I think I just gave you an example of what subjunctive mode is when we were talking about the daughter be promoted to next grade. So we look at it one by one. What is indicative mode? What does indicative mode? How do you identify it in a sentence?
Stating fact.
When you're stating fact, okay, when you're making statements, when you're stating facts, okay, usually you use the indicative mode. Okay, so within indicative mode, the sentences could be, if I'm to talk about the kind of sentences that's a part of indicative mode, all three declarative sentences, interrogative sentences, and the exclamatory sentences also sometimes can be a part of indicative mode. Please mute yourself. There's too much background noise from someone's side. Okay, unmute yourself only when you're speaking to me, otherwise it's okay. All right, so indicative mode sentences, they could be either simple sentences like what she was saying, right? So they could be statements, declarative sentences, which are factual statements, simple statements, or it could be like a question, right? Or it can also be an exclamation also sometimes, right? Basically, if it is stating anything or stating a fact, then it's all right. Okay, let me try and give you an example. I'll give you 3 sets of examples to understand what indicative mode means. Okay, so so that you're able to identify it properly when you have it in the exam. Okay, look at the sentence. Okay, so the sentence goes like this. I'm going to give you 3 sets of sentences and all of them are in indicative mode. Okay, so look at this. Prasad has known me for a long time. Okay, this is the first sentence. What kind of sentence is this? If I have a sentence like this, Prasad has known me for a long time.
Indicative mode, ma'am.
Indicative mode, but what kind of sentence? A declarative sentence, right? A normal sentence in English, a plain sentence, a declarative sentence, right? Now look at the second one. How well does Prasad play? How well does Prasad play? What kind of sentence?
Interrogative.
Interrogative sentence, right? Okay, so look at this one, both, and if I am to use an exclamative sentence, then look, Prasad is here. Look, Prasad is here. So this is exclamation. Of course, you cannot show it using written this thing. The only point you can do is use an exclamatory mark. But exclamation is more of a expression than, expression in speaking than in writing, right? So I have 3 sets of sentence. The first one is, Prasad has known me for a long time. Then, how well does Prasad play? And the third one is, look, Prasad is here. Right? They are 3 different kind of sentences in terms of expression, but all of them are making statements, right? All of them are giving you a factual detail. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So if this is the overall mood of the sentence, then you call this as the indicative mode. Okay, this is the indicative mode. Now about imperative mode, this is very easy. All imperative sentences will be of imperative mode. Okay, so anything, any sentence that impels towards giving command, request, all of them are going to be in imperative mode. Okay, so command and request part forms the imperative mode. Understand? Indicative is for making factual statements, okay, or simple plain statements, whether in interrogative or exclamatory or declarative form. And imperative mode is for imperative sentences, which usually refer to, or which usually are used in English to show, command, and request. Okay, get this part clear? Right. So anything like stop them, okay, or sit down, call the police, Okay, all of them are going to be imperative mode. Right? Now, subjunctive. Subjunctive, what is subjunctive? So usually when when you have to show uncertainty, some sort of hypothetical statement, okay, or when you want to indicate something which is which sounds like a rule, okay, or say when you want to show something that is temporary, okay, like say something that is tentative, okay, when you want to express a wish, okay, all of those kind of sentences is what we refer to as subjunctive sentences. Okay, the difference here is you will have sentences like the one you have on screen. So if I were you, I would say nothing. The mode is if I were you, right? So this is like this is subjunctive. Definitely this is a subjunctive one, right? So what difference do you see here? You haven't written if I was you. You have written if I were you. Okay. So difference you need to keep in mind is if the same sentence was written with was. Okay. If I say if I was you, I would say nothing. Okay. Then the mode of the sentence becomes indicative. Okay. Right. So then this is like not a wish. To make it a wish, you will have to use the verb form if I were you, which is what I told you. In mood, again, the inflection or any change that happens again happens on the verb. So it's the verb that changes to show the attitude of the speaker. Okay, nothing else. So if I say, if I was you, I would say nothing. This converts the sentence into something like a declarative statement. And then the mood here is indicative mode. Okay. Whereas if I say, if I were you, I would say nothing. This is a sentence in subjunctive mode. Okay. Right? So this expresses a wish for the person. Okay. So if I were you, I would say nothing. In all formal styles, you would see, if I were you, I would say nothing. Okay. The same sentence again in informal conversations can change to if I was you. In that case, the person is still showing a wish, but because it is an informal context, that person has done away with the verb part and put was. Okay. So two things here, don't get confused. If you have a sentence like, if I were you, I would say nothing. This is a clear case of subjunctive mode. Okay. Somebody expressing a wish. But the same thing, if you are writing with was, then it's going to be a sentence in indicative mode. But now, given this part, also keep it in mind that sometimes people in informal conversation, to express a wish, to show subjunctive mode, they can use if I was you, I would say nothing. Okay. Got these two differences? Yeah, you still with me, guys?
Yes, yeah, ma'am, I'm not clear on this.
Okay, don't get confused in this. For subjunctive mode, the correct way of doing it is if I were you. But what happens in informal conversation, sometimes people just do away with the verb part. They use was instead of verb. Okay. So that is just an additional information which I wanted to give you. Like sometimes people do this. In informal spaces, a lot of things happen. And another example I can give you is usually you don't use that. No, with respect to this one, I can just replace the latter part of it. I don't think a lot of things would change. But to explain you what informal and formal is, I can give you another example with a different segment in English, which is the word that. Okay. So usually you don't use the word that to refer to people. Okay. So when it is people, you usually use who or whom. But in informal conversations in English, sometimes people use that to refer to people also. The boy that, okay, usually that's not how it works. In formal English, you definitely have to use the relative pronoun who. The boy who is sitting in the corner of the room is my brother. But in informal conversations or informal English, people tend to use the boy that is sitting in the corner. Okay, so this replacing verb with was is a similar case. Okay, in informal English, though you should be using verb, in informal English, people have a habit of replacing verb with was to indicate subjunctive mode. Okay, that was the only point I was trying to make. But with respect to the discussion on mode itself, if the sentences, if I were you, I would say nothing. This is a clear case of subjunctive mode. And if it is replaced with was, then it becomes indicative mode. Clear?
Miss, can you please explain indicative and subjunctive difference once again, not in context only this example, otherwise, I mean, I'm not clear on
Indicative, indicative is usually when you want to just make a factual statement. So if I say, if I was you, I would say nothing. Then this is a factual statement. I'm just saying that this is what I would have done. A plain statement. Okay, a statement that I've made. But if I have to show subjunctive mode, then I say, if I were you. This is basically converting the same factual sentence into a wish. Okay.
All right.
If I were you, I would say nothing.
Okay. Got it. Yes. Thank you.
Or say a hypothetical statement where if I were you, which cannot be true, right? I would say nothing.
Okay. So basically, indicative are the facts, and these are might be hypothetical, which is not true in current context.
To when you want to indicate something that is hypothetical, imaginative, tentative, optional, temporary. You want to express a wish, you want to give a wish to somebody. Okay. All of this would transform as subjunctive mode. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So the first one we have already cleared. Now we look at the second one. After that, there were no more disturbances. After that, there were no more disturbances. Indicative, subjunctive, or imperative?
Indicative.
Indicative, correct. Heaven forbid that we should interfere in the dispute.
Subjunctive.
Again, indicative.
Subjunctive.
Subjunctive. Heaven forbid that we should. See, there is what is this? There is some hypothesis and tentativeness involved here, right? Heaven forbid that we should interfere in the dispute. We should interfere in the dispute. Look at that. Right? Heaven forbid that we should interfere in the dispute. This is not a factual statement. This is somebody making a wish. Heaven forbid we should interfere in the dispute. Okay. Get this? I don't know who said indicative. Do you see the difference?
Yeah.
Right. If the sentence was, we should not interfere in the dispute, then it could be indicative. But here, there's someone saying, someone's expressive wish that heaven forbid that we should interfere in the dispute. Okay. Now, the fourth one is, if it is not raining, take the dog for a walk. If it is not raining, or if it's not raining, take the dog for a walk.
Indicative, ma'am.
This is indicative. Okay. If it is not raining, take the dog for a walk. This is a statement. This does not express any wish or condition or anything like that. There's a condition, but then again, it's a factuality that is involved. There's a factuality involved in it. Then nobody is making a wish. The person is giving some sort of an advice. And if it's not raining, take the dog for a wish. Dog for a walk. Indicative mode again. Now the last one. I asked that references be sent to the manager.
Imperative.
I asked that references be sent to the manager. Imperative.
It's a command.
Will you explain that?
Ask is a request.
Yes, it's a command to the.
No,
Sorry?
It's the same.
Asked is a request, no, ma'am. I asked.
I asked that reference be sent to the.
I asked that references be sent to the manager. What mode is this?
Imperative.
This is not imperative. There is no
It's indicative.
command or action. No, there is no command and action involved here. Sorry, request. I asked that references be sent to the manager.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
I think subjunctive, because this action has not been done yet. It's supposed to happen.
Supposed to happen. Yes, it's supposed to happen, and the person wishes it to happen a certain way. I asked that references be sent to the manager. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Huh?
Yes, ma'am.
No. So if you want to make this indicative, how do you change it?
He sent to the manager. He sent the reference. He sent references to the manager.
References should be sent to the manager. Okay. So if I have to say references should be sent to the manager, then it becomes indicative mode. Okay. References should be sent to the manager, but becomes indicative mode. Okay. If I say send the references to the manager, then what is the mood?
Imperative.
Imperative. Send the references to the manager, I'm commanding, right? So that becomes imperative mode. If I say references should be sent to the manager, becomes indicative mode. But this is something that I'm wishing for. I ask that the references be sent to the manager. This is subjunctive mode. Okay. Get this? Sure, Priyanka. No problem. I'm also done. Okay. So any questions or doubts that you have? Anybody? No? Okay. So keep practicing this. Okay. Find more. You can, do something. You can find more questions from your part. And if you're confused with how to answer them, you can bring it to these sessions and you can discuss them here. Okay. So practice is something that you will have to regularly do with, particularly when you're revising structure. Okay, because it becomes a little technical when you're discussing grammar, and it's nice that you clear off the things right now so that basically it will help you better when you're writing and speaking at a later stage. Okay, so if you have no more questions, we can wind up for today, and I'll meet you next week the same time. All right. So see you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.